Hi there, seem to have been on a long journey of housekeeping tasks, trying to repair things that are broken, and one of them was this Dell monitor. It has a switch on the front which you press to switch it on and off. It's only a push button, it doesn't latch or anything, it's just simple push switch. The thing, as you can see, is quite old, it's got quite rectangular, quite like it, rather than the long, narrow, thin things that we have at the moment. It came on a great big stand, so I put a wooden stand at the back to replace it, so it was small and close to the table. And that is held in place by a metal plate which fastens on to the back of the monitor so that you can remove the monitor from its stand if it was fastened on a wall. To do that, it actually has a little button underneath there, and also underneath there are the 4 screws that hold on this great big plastic piece. I didn't realise that to start with, and so to try and get in I took off one of the edge pieces, one of these, expecting to be able to see screws down the side holding on the frame at the front. Unfortunately it wasn't the case, and in taking that off I managed to split the case as well. Put some super glue in and put it back together, and it doesn't look too bad. As I was taking it apart, I made the mistake of, there's a button on the back underneath here that you press to release this plate. I made the mistake of not putting this button back when I put it back together, and so ended up just with this lump of metal. Couldn't work out how to get this to release this back plate here, and so drilled it away and eventually found out that to get this to operate you have to push down that way, and the button itself has got a slidey bit on that slides onto this bit as well. So that was one of the problems I came across that upset me. It's now a bit of a mess, but at least it's hidden behind the stand, which is a mess anyway. Eventually got onto the idea that the frame at the front is just held on by these clips. So undoing these clips, I just use a table knife which isn't sharp and will do it. I believe there is a posh name, a spludger or something like that for a specific device, but for me a blunt knife works. So 4 down this side, 5 along the back, and this frame came off. Once the frame was off, then I found a circuit board which was fastened to the frame with its 5 buttons on it and 3 holes, tiny little screws that held this PCB onto that big outer frame. Took it off, but was worried of course about this ribbon cable which comes down. There's the PCB, the ribbon cable comes down here, round all the way along the back, all the way up the side, and finally goes in up over here behind these 2 USB connectors. I just wonder if originally it had its connections down the side and then they decided to move it, and that's why we have this great big long cable. While messing around with it, of course, I managed to damage it. The buttons themselves consist of a dished piece of metal which when pressed clicks down, touching a contact in the middle, and then comes back again when released. These are only held in place by very small pieces of plastic, which are probably okay when it's all set up, but when you're messing around with it, or at least when I was messing around with it, I managed to lose one of these metal pieces, knock it off, lose it, and spend ages looking for it. Next to it here, just as while we're here, is a green LED there and an amber, I suppose A is for there. So green for when the monitor's on and amber for when it's on standby. When I'd taken it apart, I had a look on the frame. and found this button here along with the other buttons over there. These buttons then have a little peg in the middle, and I assumed that this one should have a peg in the middle. So I got some epoxy, lump of wire, stuck the wire in, let it set in the epoxy, and then cut it off. After I cut it off, no chance, didn't work. I put the circuit board at the back and lined up the switches and realised that the switch was over to the side somewhere over here, presumably so that the light can shine through when it shows up amber or green. So then, after having this one in the centre, I tried one at the side, but it didn't work. Another problem I had was that this piece here is just held on by 3 plastic pegs which have been bent over or heated up and melted to hold this in place. This seemed quite loose, so could have been one of the reasons that it didn't work. It had been going for a while and I had to press it harder and harder to try and switch it, so eventually of course it went. This didn't work either. Getting really fed up by now, I decided to cut through the frame at the front, and upon cutting through I found that the actual button itself was over to the side of the switch, well over to the side of the switch, and therefore was the reason I couldn't get my little bit of knitting needle, plastic knitting needle, to touch it. So in desperation I just got another piece of knitting needle, stuck it on the side of the button very carefully so that it didn't stick to the frame, and that then worked. It's messy, it doesn't look very nice, but it works. And that was really all I wanted, to get this Dell computer back working again. Still don't think this idea of this button here is very clever. I think that has, by time, has bent out or isn't going to press against the button, and that this came apart isn't really a good idea. I like the push button to be in the middle over there. However, it works now. I've finished. I'm ever so glad that I've got it done. I've learnt a lot from doing it. I've learnt that the monitor itself is quite nicely made. It's good construction. If I wanted to take the back off here, this plastic back off, the 4 screws that hold it in place are underneath this plate, so this plate's got to come off before we can take this plastic back off. Yeah, it's been an interesting project. I've quite enjoyed doing it in the end, although got really frustrated in the middle. Could have thrown it in the bin. However, it works now, so I'm chuffed. So it's bye now. Bye.